We are continuing on page 47 of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. We are in the third chapter, after having placed our cornerstone and having said, yes, we now believe or are willing to believe. That was great news to us, for we had assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith which seemed difficult to believe. When people presented us with spiritual approaches, how frequently did we all say, I wish I had what that man has. I am sure it would work if only I could believe as he believes. But I cannot accept as surely true the many articles of faith which are plain to him. So it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a simpler level. Besides a seemingly inability to accept much on faith, we often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice. Many of us have been so touchy that even casual reference to spiritual things made us bristle with antagonism. This sort of thinking had to be abandoned. Though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. Faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we had tried to been on other questions. In this respect, alcohol was a great persuader. It finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. Sometimes this was a tedious process. We hope no one else will be prejudiced for as long as some of us were. The reader may still ask why he should believe in a power greater than himself. We think there are good reasons. Let's have a look at some of them. The practical individual of today is a stickler for facts and results. Nevertheless, the 20th century readily accepts theories of all kinds, provided they are firmly grounded in fact. We have numerous theories, for example, about electricity. Everybody believes them without a murmur of a doubt. Why this ready acceptance? Simply because it was impossible to explain what we see, feel, direct, and use without a reasonable assumption as a starting point. Everyone nowadays believes in scores of assumptions for which there was good evidence, but no perfect visual proof. And does not science demonstrate that visual proof is the weakest proof? It is being constantly revealed as mankind studies the material world that outward appearances are not inward reality at all. And I'm going to stop right there. So back it up to that first page, page 47. The line that I like to touch on is that I wish I had what that man has. I'm sure it would work if only I believe as he believes. So for me, it took me a long time to get to where I am, where I have this God-conscious connection. I didn't start that way. And so I always like to remind my prospect or someone I'm working with, reading the book with, of the humble beginnings I made, where I had my Oprah higher power, right? I'm going to believe in the secret, the law of attraction, the universal spirit. That was my beginning. And as I grew through, I came to this God conscious living, right? And then we go to the other side and it says, those spiritual things that made us bristle with antagonism. I've actually seen people who have a physical reaction to the word God. They actually have a physical reaction. And I've seen that person soften. So, there is all aspects that we can do. And we say we hope no one else will be prejudiced for as long as some of us are, because we know it keeps you from that sunlight of the spirit, right? Like we know from experience that holding on to those prejudices is going to keep you from having that blockage to God removed and having this loving, joyous, and free life. And then at the bottom, it talks about those theories and uses the example of electricity. Here, I love my two examples, one being my cell phone. I have never once in my life called the cell phone provider and said, how does the text message work? Why does it go? You need to tell me the steps, the facts, the science inside the phone. How does it work? I've never asked that. But why did I ask how God works, how prayer works, and all of that so many times, right? I just have a simple assumption that when I type in a text message providing my bill is paid and my battery is charged, the message is going to go to the person I received it. And I know this to be true because the person who I send the message to messages me back most of the time. But I've never called the cell phone company and said, how does it work? So I use that example for prayer, right? I have never gotten a reasonable explanation of how prayer works to God, but I have seen it work now because I've practiced it. And so I have a reasonable assumption that prayer works and God is present. The same example can be used with Wi-Fi, right? My Wi-Fi is on, my bill is paid. I have Google. I don't know how I have Google, but I have Google. And I've never called and asked anybody to explain it to me. I just go on the reasonable assumption that I pay my bill, I plug that thing in, and I have internet. And so these are really good examples that you can use to take to your prospects as well, if you so desire. Anyone else want to speak? Dottie, of course. Gotta hit your button.
You've turned it on. Dottie Alcoholic. So I just want to remind you that asterisk before the paragraph that we read, Appendix 2, Spiritual Experience. It's listed for the third time. Read it, accept it, understand it. So now moving forward. So in that paragraph, the first paragraph we read, it's like the spiritual principles. It's faith. Faith is knowledge, right? So once we have that little bit of knowledge, I wish I had what that man has. I am sure it would work if I could only believe as he believes. That's the willingness to believe after you get faith, or after I got faith. And it was, I am so grateful that it happened so quickly for me, because I was angry for so long. So it was that in itself was a miracle. On page 48, handicapped by apostasy and sensitive and unreasoning prejudice. When discussing God, Kim said the same thing. People just hear that God word and they have such reactions. And I was one of them. I was one of them while I was drinking. The anger and the fury that came out of me because how I saw things the wrong way. But once I got the knowledge that my higher power never left me and he was always there with me and I just pushed him away, things turned around and started getting better. Also in that paragraph on page 48 is faced with alcoholic's destruction, we soon became an open-minded on spiritual matters as we had tried to be on other questions. So one of the greatest things for this alcoholic was my alcoholism, while I was active, pushed me away from God, but being sober and following the suggestions of other people within the program and following the book the way it was written, it has now pushed me towards God. And it's just simply amazing. And then at the last paragraph that Kim read, why this ready acceptance, simply because it is impossible to explain. We see it, feel it, direct it, and use it without reasonable assumption as a starting point. And absolutely, when I had my white light experience in rehab, I couldn't explain it. But I felt it. I saw a difference in me, and now I can use it and help others get through their difficulties with the God word. So we'll use it as good orderly direction for those who are still struggling with that word, until you understand what your higher power does for you. So that's all I have, Kim. Thanks.
Thanks, Dottie. Yvonne.
Hi, I'm Yvonne. I'm an alcoholic. Just a couple things real fast. It's funny, in my home group meeting, it's a women's meeting. One of the women is an electrical engineer, so she understands the electricity thing. But the other, I was one of those people too with the God word. I didn't want to hear it. It made me uncomfortable. And I was not willing to get rid of that prejudice that was there, having had some bad experiences with religion and all of that, and God, and being told that I should fear God and all of that. But once I became willing to believe and softened up, it's become a lot easier to learn, to accept, and to just take in um, the higher power, and not know how it works, just know that it does. And and it, like we've talked about before, it doesn't matter what I call him as long as I call him. You know, so I think with that I will pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Oh, you gotta hit your unmute. Oh, whoops. Do it again. I hit it. Damn finger. There we go.
Okay. Okay, hi. She bit me.
I saw that.
Okay, so this paragraph, like the last paragraph on page 48 that we just read always is my go-to, because it's like in my first recovery, when I came in 2005, it's like I thought that once you got, the car, the job, the boyfriend, the like all that material stuff, I thought that I had arrived, right? Like I had made it. Like this is what life was supposed to bring me. So now that I'm sober and I have all my stuff, everything's good. So probably around 5 years is when I lost my faith. But I always like that line, that outward appearances are not inward reality at all, because I was dying inside, right? I could go to the meetings and I could share this powerful message and spew out all this word vomit and everything, but then it's like I would leave the meeting and I would feel depressed and I would feel so alone, and I'd like cry on my way home that nobody spoke to me after the meeting, or all these things. Like I started to get in a lot of like really bad like self-pity when I stopped relying on my higher power, when I stopped believing that the things that made me whole was the stuff and not God being in my life. And today I know that like God needs to be in my life 24/7. Like there's days where I'm like, I don't even want to pray right now. I don't want to deal with anything. Like I just want to hole up, and I just want to like, feel sorry for myself. Because there are days where it's like I still like to sit on my pity potty and feel sorry for myself. But then I always have to, take it back to like I have so many little things outlined in my book, and then just like this little little writings and stuff. Like I put material proof with a question mark, because I don't need material proof anymore, right? I need God proof. And it doesn't even matter how things appear on the inside. What matters is how I feel on the inside. And I have to feel good on the inside in order to help other people, in order to like spread my message to other people. And it's got to be a positive message, because I was really mean before, right? Like I was like, you want honesty, come to me and I'll cut it dry for you, right? But nowadays it's like I'm a lot more gentle and I'm a lot more calm, and it's because like I've worked with other people that have brought me to a good point of love and tolerance. And like God is everything or he is nothing. Like I have to welcome into my day every single morning, because my head wants to be like, no, we're good today. That's it. That's all I want to share. Thank you.
Thanks, Janet. Leslie.
Morning. Leslie here, alcoholic. I want to say that when I first started going to AA, which is like I'm 18 months into the program, when I first started going, I was like, this is really cool about God, our higher power. And there was a lot of, talking about different things about God. And I just assumed that they had the same God as I had. And then I realized that, wait a second, this isn't religion we're talking about. This is a spiritual program. And I was sharing in one meeting, and I was chastised. I was actually called out, and I told the guy afterwards, because he was going on about, we don't say God per se, it's, offensive to Muslims or Jewish people and this kind of stuff like that. And I said, well, thank you for, calling me out in this meeting and kind of like berating me about my belief. And if I felt at that time, I can't exactly remember the words that he said, but I felt at that time that if I was a newcomer and I wasn't strong in my faith in God, I would have said, I'm out of here and never go back to AA. And so I just wanted to share that because it was important to me, and I've remembered that this whole time. And that person, I think, still has problems. But I've got a lot of faith, and I've got a lot of trust that that he will reveal himself to that person in time. But you got to be willing. That's all I got to say.
Thank you so much, Leslie. And that definitely speaks to the, people who bristle with antagonism about God. And we'll get to a page later in the book, and it says, we never apologize for God. I hear people share at meetings, and they minimize their God by saying, my higher power, which I choose to call God. I just talk about God. I don't give a hoot. So don't apologize for your conception of God, please. Please, please. Linda. You gotta hit your button. There you go.
Hi, I'm Linda. I'm an alcoholic. So I am one of those people who physically and visibly bristled at the sound of the word God. And that's where I was when I came into this program. And I've come a long way, but I'm certainly not where I need to be, I believe. But reading that paragraph that, where was it? Oh, now I lost it. Oh, where it says, the one that, simply because it is impossible to explain what we see, feel, direct, and use without a reasonable assumption as a starting point. And that's perfect for me, because that's where I am. I have a reasonable assumption of that there's something. I don't know what it is, but I know that I'm at least, and that in the year and a half almost that I've been in this program, that's as far as I've gotten. But that's huge for me after a lifetime of just active denial and just refusal. And one of the things today I was doing some step work, and when I write, I've gotten to the point where I don't say, when I'm in my writing, higher power it was getting cumbersome to write it every time, and HP was weird, and so I just started using the word God, but I refused to capitalize it. Absolutely refused. That was but it was to the point where every time I wrote it, it was distracting because I was so busy, like being pissed off about refusing to capitalize it. And so I was reading. I'm doing step 7, and there was this line in the 12 and 12, and it says, the chief activator of our defects has been self-centered fear. Primarily fear that we could lose something we already possessed or would fail to get something we demanded. And that was one of those big ones that it hit me like, yeah, I mean, that I fear that if I believe in God, I will lose my control. And there was a whole lot of writing that went on after that. But what I did realize was that without even thinking about it, my gods after reading that were capitalized. And I didn't, and I just realized all this while we were sitting here reading this. So that was thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you so much, Linda. Funny story, because like I said, I did not want God either. So I had the Oprah higher power, like spirit of the, it was like a sentence and a half long. And then I eventually grew to a higher power, and then we just started calling him HP, and it was capitals though, capital H, capital P, and then all of a sudden it was just God, right? And but we were going to refer back to, what page was it? Page 46, middle of the page, where it says that, we can't fully define it or comprehend that power, and then comma, which is God. So it's just one and the same. Choose your own adventure and call it what you will. We'll take one more share on this page, and then we're going to move on. Pam?
Hi, my name's Pam, and I'm an alcoholic. I kind of had the opposite with the higher power. I had grown up in the church and had strong faith in God, and so I had always had a belief in God. But so I kind of wondered when I came into the program, because I prayed to God several times, please help me quit drinking. Please help me. But what I realized was, but when I came into the program, I was also given the gift of desperation. So I figured I must be doing something wrong because I knew AA worked. So, but what I realized is that I had never turned my will over to God. And I really had never learned how to pray properly. Thy will be done, not mine. So everything fell into place as soon as I came into the program. But it was kind of questionable when I first came in, because I thought, why will it work now if it's never worked before? But it was the way I was praying. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pam. And I've had a similar response with someone I've worked with where they have had a God and come from a religious background, and their hang up was that they had someone else's version of God that had been imposed on them. So they believed in a God, but it was a religious God, not a God personal to them. So that's something else that someone, if it affects you, maybe want to meditate on. All right, we're going to move on just to be conscious of time. Bottom of page 48. The prosaic steel girder is a mass of electrons whirling around each other at incredible speed. These tiny bodies are governed by precise laws, and these laws hold true throughout the material world. Science tells us so. We have no reason to doubt it. When, however, the perfectly logical assumption is suggested that underneath the material world and life as we see it, there is an all-powerful, guiding, creative intelligence, right there our perverse streak comes to the surface, and we laboriously set out to convince ourselves it isn't so. We read wordy books and indulge in windy arguments, thinking we believe this universe needs no God to explain it. Were our contentions true, it would follow that life originated out of nothing, means nothing, and proceeds nowhere. Instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents, spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation, we agnostics and atheists choose to believe that our human intelligence was the last word, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and end of all. Rather vain of us, wasn't it? We who have traveled this dubious path beg you to lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. We have learned that whatever the human frailties of various faiths may be, those faiths have given purpose and direction to millions. People of faith have a logical idea of what life is all about. Actually, we used to have no reasonable conception whatever. We used to amuse ourselves by cynically dissecting spiritual beliefs and practices when we might have observed that many spiritually minded persons of all races, colors, and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness which we should have sought ourselves. So I'm just going to touch a little bit on that first paragraph, and I always like to think of the chicken and the egg. And you see it on Facebook all the time. What came first, the chicken or the egg? And it's like, okay, well, you need an egg to get the chicken, but you need a chicken to lay the egg. So where did it come from? Where did it start? So my reasonable assumption is, well, God put the egg there, it hatched into a chicken, and the chicken started laying more eggs, right? So there's so many of these little scientific theories that you can look at, like the Big Bang Theory for the creation of the universe. Well, there was two particles, and they banged together, and they made the universe. Okay, where did the two particles come from? Who banged them together? So that's just my little examples on that paragraph for one. And then we get to that bottom paragraph where it says, those of us who have traveled this dubious path, we beg you. And here we are again, begging you to lay aside your prejudices, because we know these prejudices are going to be stumbling blocks in your program and as we move forward through the pages. We cynically dissect spiritual beliefs and practices when we might have observed that many spiritually minded persons, you look at people that go to church and on a whole, they seem happy. They seem to have their lives together, and yet we dissect it and we look into it, or we look at the bad apple in the church, and that's the one that we focus in on. Anybody want to talk on this page? Somebody more scientifically inclined? Now that's a first. All right, we'll keep reading. Page 50. Well, that's kind of weird. Instead, we looked at the human defects of those people and sometimes used their shortcomings as a basis of wholesale condemnation. We talked of intolerance while we were intolerant ourselves. We missed the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. We never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing. In our personal stories, you will find a wide variation in the way each teller approaches and conceives of the power which is greater than himself. Whether we agree with a particular approach or conception seems to make little difference. Experience has taught us that these are matters about which, for our purpose, we need not be worried. They are questions for each individual to settle for himself. On one proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than himself. This power has in each case accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. As a celebrated American statesman put it, let's look at the record. I'm going to stop right there really quick because the next one's a longer story and I don't want to break it up. So let's look at the record really quick in this room. How many people in this room have a higher power or have God? Hands up. And how many of you guys are sober? Keep your hands up if you're still sober. So there's a pretty good record of account, right? We've done that in my home group. Who has a higher power or God, right? Are you sober? Okay. So there is like a pretty good example of how it works. The one thing that I didn't get from this page that I missed a bunch of times was how we lost the beauty of the forest because we were distracted by an ugly tree. Like how that hit me when I finally read that line and let it sink in was huge because I did that for years and years and years. One ugly tree and I threw the whole forest away. And wow, was life horrid, right? And now I even think the ugly trees are special, right? Like I look at all the trees as special in their own individual way and having something to contribute. Like even when I go hiking, and if you follow me on Facebook, you see my posts, there is beautiful trees that have fallen over and now there's moss growing on them. So those technically are ugly trees, but there's beauty in them as well. And you know, those trees, they decay and they feed the new trees that grow. So we have to, you know, look at a big picture instead of that one ugly tree. Anyone want to talk on those two paragraphs? Dottie! You got to hit your button.
I know. Dottie Alcoholic. I just have to add on to Kim because she again stole everything out of my big book. You know, just to add to what Kim was saying about the ugly tree. This afternoon, when I shared about in our daily reflection, and I shared about the story from Living Sober, it was kind of the same thing. And I shared about Michael's birds in the background that was in nature. You know, when I was out there drinking, all I could see was the negative and the ugly in everything. No, even if it was beautiful, I found a flaw in it. You know, and now I you know, as Tree was saying to Kim was saying about the tree that fell down. You know, now there's gorgeous moss growing on it, and then it'll start to bloom other trees, and it's just amazing how my thinking has changed from always being negative to always finding a positive in everything. And you know, and I share with all my sponsees, you know, and I start with you know, we're all that negative when we come in. And I tell them, you know, for every negative thought you have, there's two positives, and start looking for them. And then, you know, and they catch themselves as they start to go into that negative routine. And it's defining that positive. And that's how it was for me when I got my spiritual white light experience. And got my God. And in the second paragraph, it's just, faith is hope, right? And hope is a track record, and that's what every one of them has gained access and believes in a higher power greater than themselves. And Kim had us all raise our hands, and it was true. There's a track record that it works, and somebody mentioned prayer earlier. I don't know how prayer works, but it does, and I keep doing it, and I'll continue to do it. So there's some things that this mind is not supposed to understand. But you know what? If it works, you work it. So I'm going to continue to work it.
Thank you, Dottie. Teresa, New York. You got to hit your unmute.
Okay.
There you go.
Hi, I'm Teresa. First of all, I didn't really know, or I knew a little bit what obstinacy meant on the top of page 48, but I looked it up, and it starts, besides a seemingly inability to accept faith, we often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice. Obstinacy is stubbornness and inflexibility. So, this is all step one. All of these pages, because the paragraph you just read, every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than himself. That's step one in a nutshell. And this power has each case accomplished a miraculous, the humanly impossible. Well, each one of us is a miracle if we stopped drinking. That's how I look at it. Because I tried for a year and a half to try on my own to stop, and I couldn't without the help of God and with everybody from this program. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And not wanting to correct you, but we're talking step 2 today. We're referring to step 2. Flo, gotta hit your button. There you go.
Hi, I'm Flo Alcoholic. I just wanted to say that originally my God was a group of drunks, and it was the people in the rooms that had something I wanted, and that's what I started with, and it's grown from there. And the other thing I wanted to add, the first 12-step retreat I ever went to was run by Father Bill Wilson, and he was a priest, he was an alcoholic, and he didn't find recovery until he joined Alcoholics Anonymous, even though he had God. And if anybody's got God, a priest should have God, but it didn't keep him sober until he started doing the work. Anyway, glad to be here and glad to be sober. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Flo. And yeah, there's a lot of priests and such in our fellowship. Leslie P.
Hi. The word that I was trying to remember was rebuke, and how I've been rebuked at that one meeting. And the other people in the group said, yeah, you were rebuking her, but for my belief. Aside from all that, I was thinking about, first of all, my cup is usually half full. I've always lived my life with it being half full, and I try to see the beauty in everything. Even some ugly trees, because they're pretty good snags. They harbor animals. Animals make their little homes in them, and they're useful. One thing that I thought about when we're thinking about the tree is the life force of that tree, and it could be a mother tree. And if you cut that mother tree down, it will affect all the other trees around it, because all of those other trees are underneath in the phloem, the xylem and the phloem of the tree. It's moving back and forth underneath the ground that we can't see through the root system. So you cut down one tree, and it'll affect everything. So I just thought that I would add that little biological thing.
Thank you so much, Leslie. All right, quick look. Anyone else? All right, let's go. 2 more paragraphs, and then we'll see. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed, They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power, and to do certain simple things, there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, they show the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. They show how the change came over them. When many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith. Now that right there is the AA Yelp review of God. It's like when we did our hands up, that exercise is continuing into this paragraph. So they're talking that they flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, which is step 2, to take a certain attitude toward that power, step 3, and then to do certain simple things, steps 4 through 12, there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. Yep, that's happened to me. I can give that Yelp review. And then they talk about, the collapse, the despair, the failure of human resources. This happened soon after they made their few simple requirements. So those requirements, what was told to me: honesty, willingness, open-mindedness. We have to be honest, we have to be willing, and we have to be open-minded for this. These are our simple requirements. And then leaving aside the drink question, they tell us why living was so unsatisfactory. So once we put down the drink, that's when we found that our life was unsatisfactory. Anybody want to speak on that chapter? Nope. Good. All right. Cool. This world of ours has made more material progress in the last century than in all the millenniums that went before. Almost everyone knows the reason. Students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of men in those days was equal to the best of today. Yet in ancient times, material progress was painfully slow. The spirit of modern scientific inquiry, research, and invention was almost unknown. In the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. Some of the contemporaries of Columbus thought that a round earth preposterous. Others came near pulling Galileo to death for his astronomical heresies. We asked ourselves this: are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as were the ancients about the realm of the material? Even in the present century, American newspapers were afraid to print an account of the Wright brothers' successful flight at Kitty Hawk. Had not all efforts at flight failed before? Had not Professor Langley's flying machine gone to the bottom of the Potomac River? Was it not true that the best mathematical minds had proved man could never fly? Had not people said God had reserved this privilege to the birds? Only 30 years later, and the conquest of air was almost an old story, and airplane travel was in full swing. Alrighty, let's talk about that page. The biggest thing that jumps out at me in this is fears. Fear, unwillingness, no open-mindedness. So we just talk about those simple requirements being honesty, willingness, and open-mindedness. These people weren't open-minded. These people weren't willing to try something new, and a lot of it was based in fear, right? So that's my biggest takeaway from that. Marla, You got to hit your unmute.
Thanks. Yeah. This is really great. Thanks. My name is Marla, an addict alcoholic, and I was looking back. Well, anyways, what I like that's happening is from page 33 on that making these connections and decisions about where we're at in the program process. I'm not saying it right, but anyways, but the point is little by little, I see like an opportunity for me to check my thinking against my alcoholic thinking, against my willingness, against my refusal. And there's nothing that, like when I saw how many people could get sober and stay sober just in my own community, who were pretty hopeless, couldn't do anything to help themselves, and just by doing this simple thing like open willing analysis, they were able to be free of alcohol. And that to me was the greatest miracle of all. So, I was willing to go into the grocery store and buy like Glamour or Cosmo or something to read the horoscope before I would go out with my friends. Now, why I would do that, but yet I wouldn't give myself the opportunity of just saying, I'm coming to believe, yes, it's possible this could be. So I think this adds a lot more to that foundation that we've been talking about. So I'm really grateful. And yes, fear is definitely what kept me from doing this maybe more wholeheartedly, but it also stole my chances to get sober. There's certain things that there's nothing in the book that said, if you don't do this, you're kicked out of AA. It's just that things aren't going to happen for you in a way that will help you be free of alcohol. So I'm not really making much sense, but it's one of these ahas. I'm like going, I get it. I'm finally getting it. And I have to say I've been sober for 29 years. So it's kind of scary in a way that I could go this long without having these revelations. But it's just been wonderful and so freeing, just so freeing, So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I read this book pretty much at least 4 times a day, and I still things pop out of me. I'm like, oh, I see something new. Like, you just keep reading this book, like you're gonna find new things. Keep going. Joanne.
Hi everyone, I'm Joanne. I'm an alcoholic, and I've intuitively learned not to touch my mute button when Kimberly calls on me. So we get better. So I like analogies. It helps me. It just helps me. And I read this article once that helps me with what we just read. It refers to the prisoners of Auschwitz, that when the Americans and the French came to help, and they started to open the doors, they found that some of the prisoners refused to come out. And what they realized is that fear was, they knew what they had, but they were so terrified of what was out beyond what they knew. And I've sponsored people, and I've even within my own life I drank when I was really young, that the fear of what I knew how to survive on the street. I knew how to do things. And when I came into AA, and the hand was like, come in, come join us, I was terrified. And this belief of God, I had a really hard time with, because if God loved me so much, why did I experience what I experienced? But if you're new, and people with time, what I saw in terms of a power greater than myself was them showing me that my reliance was on booze and drugs. That's where my reliance was. And I'm going to get emotional, very gently and very kindly, they said, we know you're afraid. We know that you don't know. All you've seen is pain and misery. So you come with us. And they very gently just kept bringing, I'll meet you at this meeting, or we'll go out for coffee. Or if you need to call me at 2:00 in the morning, you call me. And slowly but surely, they loved me. And I would say, why? Why are you doing this? And they would say, because I can't keep my sobriety unless I use the power that has saved me to help you. And so with especially newcomers, I constantly remind myself that they have they're just walking out of hell. And so sometimes, you don't have to get God down to keep reading the rest of the book. You can just keep coming along, and it's really helpful to have a sponsor who's kind and loving to say, we'll do this together. You're not alone anymore on the streets or in the hellhole of your bedroom drinking every night or whatever. But just come, and eventually you'll see the sunlight, and eventually you will see the trees, and eventually you'll see the ugly tree, but you might be able to climb it anyways and see life differently. So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Joanne. And yes, from my personal experience, like that question we asked on 47, do you now believe, or are you willing to believe? You don't have to believe to carry on. You just have to be willing to believe as we carry on. And guess what? It happens. It just happens. It's magic. It's cool. One more on this page, Leslie. Oh, and then Dottie.
Just a quick question. What year was this written? This particular, is this back in the 1930s that this page was written?
The whole thing that we're reading was written back in 1938 and published in 1939.
So, because it's blowing me away, because they're talking about Kitty Hawk, and I'm thinking about the Harley Davidsons and all of this newness, and then in the last 120 years, how much technology has just taken off.
Oh yeah, you're gonna get your mind blown in the next paragraph. Stay tuned. Wow. Stay tuned. Dottie.
Good. Why does that keep happening? So I just want to add on to a little bit of what Joanne was saying. I have written on the side here after the we ask ourselves this: are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit? Right. So I have here in a little chart thing. It says willingness with an arrow down to belief, with an arrow down to decision, with an arrow down to action, with an arrow down to results. So once you're willing and you have the belief, and then you make that decision to do the action, you end up with great results. And that's all I wanted to add to this paragraph we were reading.
All right, let's keep reading, and we're going to blow Leslie's mind. All right. But in most fields, our generation has witnessed complete liberation of our thinking. Show any longshoreman a Sunday supplement describing a proposal to explore the moon by means of a rocket, and he will say, I bet they do it. Maybe not so long either. Is not our age characterized by the ease with which we disregard old ideas for new? By the complete readiness with which we throw away the theory or gadget which does not work for something new which does? We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems this same readiness to change our point of view. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was. When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. The Wright brothers' almost childish faith that they could build a machine which would fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment. Without that, nothing could have happened. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea that self-sufficiency would solve our problems. When others showed us that God's sufficiency worked with them, we began to feel like those who insisted the Wrights would never fly. We're going to probably go over with this page, hopefully, but I've been wrong twice before on this day. So let's go back. So that first paragraph, let's blow Leslie's mind. Yes, this was written in the late 1930s. They had not landed on the moon, but they did 30 years later. So there's a little foreshadowing there that, you know, Bill and Bob, when they wrote this with the other 100 members of Alcoholics Anonymous, they were forward thinking. Also, like, let's talk about that throw away a theory or gadget which does not work for something new which does. How often do we get the new iPhone? I got the 10. I think there's 11 now. Excuse me. We throw it away for the new thing. Sorry, excuse me. You know, so easily nowadays. Bill and Bob could never have imagined that, you know, every year we'd get a new iPhone. They had a rotary telephone and that was good for them, if they even had that back then. And then we go to that next paragraph. This one, these are the human problems. These are the basic bedevilments. These are not what makes us alcoholic. So many people I've heard, and they're like, oh, I couldn't keep a boyfriend. I couldn't control my emotional natures. I react. You know, I was a prey to misery, depression. I can't keep a job. These are human problems that we were not able to overcome. This is not what makes us an alcoholic. These are the bedevilments. And then we see others solve their problems by a reliance upon the spirit of the universe, but we doubt the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. That's just like what they said in the last paragraph, you know, the Wright brothers' main accomplishment was that they believed that they could fly. Their main accomplishment was not that they flew, was that they believed they could to the point that they did. And so, you know, why won't we just try it? Anybody want to talk on this page? Nobody?
I just had the whole page
highlighted,
underlined, so it's just so much. So I'm going to pass.
Okay, Pat, thank you. I'm like, nobody wants to talk on this page? Y'all, we're just getting it?
Okay. So, just something I had heard that I really liked. It was from a preacher. But anyway, I think it makes a lot of sense. So he talked about how in this world, we exchange money as our currency. So if we want something, we pay money and we get it, whether it's a car or a shirt or blouse or house or whatever. Money is our currency. And in heaven, things work much differently. The currency in heaven is faith. And so with that belief that it can really be done, then it comes into existence. And that's kind of what you were sharing with the Wright brothers. And yes, some of the biggest breakthroughs, even like running the 4-minute mile and stuff, you know, no one believed it could be done until someone believed it and then did it. And so anyway, so I just thought that was cool. So thank you. And pass.
Thank you so much. Regina. You gotta hit your button. There you go.
Hi everyone. I'm Regina. I'm an alcoholic. Whenever we read this in my group, there's always somebody that points out that the bedevilments, you should be comparing the bedevilments to the promises on page 83. And if you go like for each bedevilment, there's an opposite. The opposite of that bedevilment is the promise. So, for instance, we're having trouble with personal relationships. You know, we're going to know new freedom and a new happiness. Like that I thought was really cool. And when I read this the first time, I remember thinking to myself, yeah, you know, everybody has these problems. Why, you know, this isn't specific to alcoholics, but for me, the thing that really helped me see the other side of this was seeing that there are spiritual promises once we get to them on page 83. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And we've discussed that in length in our big book studies. And a lot of the time that can be really misleading to people because these are the human problems. A lot of people have these problems, and just because that you get a car back and your money bills are sorted and you have a good girlfriend, then people start to twist in their mind that maybe they're not alcoholic and everything's better and life looks better now and it's a prettier picture. So I really like to stress that these are human problems. A lot of people have these problems. They're not specific to alcoholics, and they're not a result of your spiritual condition that you have these problems. Leslie?
Hi again. I was just one thing I just wanted to point or make a mention of was I always remember when I was a kid 40 years ago, the next door neighbor would always take off, get all dressed up on Sunday and head off to church. And they always seemed so happy. I always thought, geez, here I am drinking, smoking, living this life. And I always thought, they got to have something better than I got. What is it? I just want something better. I want to know, a different life than what I was living. And so this kind of really stuck, with me. And then there are times when it appears that we got our shit together and that life is good. And appearances are always kind of neat because they confound our friends that have no idea that we are living a miserable life of alcoholism until things start to change, and you make change happen. You make it happen. So that's pretty cool. I like that page.
Thank you, Leslie. You just reminded me. Remember last time I said the lady had been praying for me for 7 years from baseball? I used to go, oh, here she comes, the church lady again. I just thought that was so funny. Jenny D.
Hey, thank you, Tim. Again, I've read this, I don't know how many times, and now I'm going, oh, these bedevilments are for everybody, not just alcoholics, right? And then it made me think about the differences. I have a sister who's not alcoholic. I don't know how this well-adjusted human being came out of our family, but she did. And because everybody else is like me in my family. When these things would happen to me, I didn't have any way to cope with them. So I would drink or I would run away from the problem, but mostly I would drink. When these things happened to my sister, she would cope and get through the issue. She was going through something, her boyfriend left her one time, and I went over her place and I said, oh my God, this must be awful. Do you have anything to drink? Because I just assumed that she was having this problem and she must want to get drunk. And she looked at me and she goes, no, why would I want to drink? This just sort of showed me that, yeah, we all had these. I just reacted so differently and destroyed my life. And now I look at, these things still happen sometimes. I have a program. I'm sober. These things still happen. I don't drink. I don't run away, and I don't destroy my life over them. I go to God, and it gets better. And I just loved reading this because it just changed this whole page for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll elaborate. It's kind of jumping ahead. So where it says, we were having these problems. So that's if we have a fear of financial insecurity. So here it's we can't hold a position. So we obviously don't have our bills paid. Well, then people say, well, the opposite problem is the fear of economic insecurity has left us. So liken it to someone can't pay their bills. They have no money, They do really well. They have $1 million in the bank, right? So the financial insecurity has left them in a human way, materially. But in a spiritual way, it may not. Say the stock market crashes, that the $1 million is lost. If they are spiritually fit, they intuitively know that it's going to be okay and that their needs will be met. And so then that is the fear of the economic security being gone. It's okay, so the $1 million isn't at my bank, but that's okay. I have faith it's going to be okay. That's the spiritual nature of the promises, not material. Because people get it really confused with the material aspect of it, where, okay, I've got these problems, now the problems are gone, I've got these things and these ideas, But the spiritual part is what they're missing of the promises. We'll get through it when we get to the promises, but I hope that example kind of made an elaboration of what I was talking about. Because, yeah, you can have $1 million in your bank account. Your fear of financial insecurity is gone. But if the $1 million is gone, are you going to still believe you're going to be okay? Are you spiritually fit enough to be like, it's okay, God's going to provide what I need because I serve him well? All right, Kelowna. Kelowna? There you go. I gotcha.
Good morning. Yeah, hello, everybody. I'm Kelowna alcoholic, and I don't say much here because I'm really listening and taking a lot of notes, and just grateful that for all of your input, because I'm going to be a great sponsor. I have not sponsored very many women, and to tell you the truth, I even though I talked to my sponsor about it, I just really don't know how to approach. However, now I'm learning after 17 years in this program, the book is how we do it. And this page here, this paragraph, I glossed over this so many times in big book readings and different studies I've been into. I didn't understand any of this until just this moment. And this is also showing me how I've been working my program and what I need to do to continue having that spiritual fitness. And because I know for myself that when I believe that I can do something, no matter what it is, and take the action, it does come to fruition. And that is a strength I have and that I can share with other women in accordance to this reading. This is great. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. All righty, Annie. Dottie's waving her hands, doing the hula. No, Dottie's good? Okay. Any last hands waving? I think that's a good high note to end the day. I don't think there's any homework unless you want to just review what we've done and think about it and meditate on it, see where you're feeling about it. Alrighty, so we will continue at the top of page 53 next time.